Hello, my friends. So, back here on the Chopra well, speaking to another luminary in a few seconds. First of all, thank you for joining us. And I have a very special friend today to join us in our conversation. He has a new book, and we're going to talk about it. I know his family well. Sanjay Gupta has been a good friend of mine for more than a decade. And recently, I had the pleasure of meeting Sanjay and Sunil's parents as well. So, first of all, welcome, Sunil, to this conversation.
Deepak, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. So, I know a little bit about your family and your background, but I'd like to hear from you a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, your education, and then how you came to be writing this book.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we grew up, Sanjay and I both grew up right outside of Detroit in a town called Novi, Michigan. And, we grew up, yeah, in a, I think, pretty white suburban neighborhood, but very, very, we never lacked for any opportunity. We felt like our parents really valued education and sort of, I think, gave us all the means that we needed to really, be what we wanted to be in the world. And I feel for that reason that in a lot of ways, it's almost as if we sort of hit the lottery kind of growing up. We had just enough to kind of really want to do something with ourselves, and I think the sort of educational means to get there. I ended up going to school. Sanjay and I both went to school here in Michigan, and then I went to Northwestern for a joint program between the law school and the business school. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and so I graduated. I took the bar exam, and I was right about to accept an offer from a pretty hardcore corporate law firm, and the starting bonus was larger than the salary that I had made before I went to law school. But it really sort of hit me, Deepak, that I just didn't want to practice law. And so in the couple of days before I was about to sign the offer, I just decided I was going to go in a different direction, and started cold calling companies in Silicon Valley, trying to figure out if I could go get a job building something, making something. I really felt like there was this creative side of me that was really untapped, and eventually, a couple of people took a chance on me, and I ended up with a job at Mozilla, which is the maker of Firefox, which led to an early product development role at Groupon, just when it was a baby startup. We grew it into a public company, and then I started my own company, Rise. And the reason that I wrote this book is because when I was starting Rise, I felt like I had at this point in time all the credentials to be an entrepreneur. But I didn't really understand at that point, how do you get inside a room and get people to really bet on something new? When you have something that isn't quite obvious, it's not quite clear. You don't have the data to show them that this is going to work, but you believe it could. How do you get people inspired in that way? Now, what I realized at that time is that creativity and persuasion are two different qualities, right? You could have a great idea, you could have a great vision, you could be a great candidate for a job and still be dismissed. And at the same time, I realized that there were these backable people out there, Deepak, that tend to go inside a room and they really mesmerize us. We want to really rally around them. We want to invest in them. And I wanted to understand, what was this mysterious it quality, and could it be learned? And so fast forward to today, I teach at Harvard. I coach rising sort of junior executives around the world, on and people and startup entrepreneurs around the world, on how to make themselves backable.
Very good to know. But before we get to that and the contents of your book, are you just two brothers or more in the family?
It's just the two of us.
And how may I ask you how old you are?
Yeah, yeah. No, so I'm 41 now.
I,
Sanjay is 10 years older than me.
I see.
So
And are you
he was kind of like a third parent
I
my parents were both worked pretty long hours.
right.
And so Sanjay literally taught me how to walk.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah.
good, good. So you're 41. Are you married?
I am. Yeah. I'm married. I have two daughters. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old.
And you told me you're based in Michigan, but you teach at Harvard as well, at the business school. Is that where you've been
It's
teaching?
actually at the medical school.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm on faculty there, and the way that that happened is that the company that I ended up starting and eventually ended up getting it funded and sold was a healthcare company called Rise, and
I see.
Rise was one-on-one coaching, health coaching, right over your mobile phone. And we were one of the first sort of, I think, companies to really use a mobile phone in this way. And it created some intrigue. And we started to partner up with medical schools around the country, one of which was Harvard Medical School. And after I exited the company, they asked me if I would come on and teach what I learned to the students. And I did. And a lot of that ended up forming into really the book.
I see. And so Rise is no longer your company. You sold it, right?
Sold it to a company called One Medical.
One Medical. And, I teach for 14 years, I taught at Harvard Medical School
Yes,
and
of
for
course.
the CME course, so I know them well.
Of course. On
And
Longwood?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, along with. And also, at their CME course, which is more for physicians at Harvard Medical School, Mass General, Beth Israel, etc.
Yeah.
So now, do you have a business now at the moment?
So right now I'm spending almost all my time working with people on how to make themselves backable. But that includes entrepreneurs. And so what ends up happening is that I'll meet with teams that I really like, and it also gives me a chance to invest in companies that I really believe in. So an example of that is Calm, the meditation service. I
Mhm.
met with the founder, Alex, 2 years ago. And I thought to myself, wow, meditation has really changed my life in such a profound way. If you could make something like this accessible to millions of people, and not only do I think that that would be, a good business, but I think it could do a lot of good in the world.
Right.
So, I spend my time now trying to help other people become backable, but I also try to back them when I think it's right.
So now let's get to the steak after the sizzle. How does one assess if somebody is backable, either an organization or a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was surprising to me when I was starting this book, when I was out there spending time with hundreds of backable people, and that ranges from Oscar-winning filmmakers to iconic founders to Michelin star chefs to leaders within companies. What I found, what I expected to find, is that they were all going to have a certain communication style. They were going to make use of great eye contact and hand gestures and pacing. But I actually did not find that to be the case. Certainly, you have people who are more Dale Carnegie-esque, right? They're more Toastmasters-esque, but you also have plenty of backable people who are quiet and shy and introverted, and they don't necessarily have those communication styles. If you want an example of that, go look up the number one most popular TED Talk right now of all time. And what you might be surprised to find is that it's actually kind of an unTED-like presentation. It's Sir Ken Robinson who gives a brilliant talk, but he's got sort of one hand in his pocket. He's got a bit of a slouch. He kind of meanders on and off script, but you believe every word that he says, and it's an amazing, amazing talk. The point is that it's not charisma that convinces people; it's conviction. Backable people take the time to convince themselves first, and then they let that conviction shine through whatever communication style that is that feels most natural to them.
Do people listen to facts more than to emotion, or how do people generally make decisions? I mean, smart people think they're making rational decisions. I
Yeah.
think we are creatures that are definitely ruled by emotion, and we justify that through facts, but I'm curious, what's your assessment?
I have found exactly the same thing. We get pulled in by stories. We
Mhm.
get pulled in by the emotion, but then we want to back up our assertion through these facts. We want to make sure, like you say, that there's not just the sizzle, there is the steak. But it's really important to have, I think, both the story and the substance. And sometimes we miss the story. And I also think story is one of those things that's been talked about so much that sometimes I think we're kind of missing what we mean by storytelling. We're not getting up in front of an audience and saying once upon a time. What we are doing is we're taking people into the substance through the eyes of what I call in the book a central character. You're casting one central character and you're helping your audience, whether that be an investor or a hiring manager or whomever, see the story through their eyes. When I was pitching my company Rise, one of the people that I pitched was Tim Ferriss, and he ended up passing. He did not end up investing in my company. But one of the things that he shared with me was how when he was writing his book, The 4 Hour Work Week, 25 publishers passed on his book in a row, 25. And he got a piece of advice, and the piece of advice was, why not rewrite this book, but rewrite it with one person in mind? Because right now you're trying to write it for a wide audience. Pick one person and write it for that one person in mind. And the reason, and when he did, by the way, it became a gigantic success. The reason that he shared that story with me, Deepak, is because when I was pitching Rise to begin with, I would share the numbers. I would talk about the rising rates of obesity and hypertension and diabetes. And then at the very, very end of my pitch, I told the story of my father. And the story I shared was how my father, when he was, not far from how old I am right now, he was in his 40s. He had triple bypass surgery. And, when we left the hospital, I mean, he looked like a completely different person. And they gave us a piece of paper and they basically said, here's how he recovers. Here's how he gets himself back to health. And it had things like eat broccoli, eat Brussels sprouts. We're an Indian family. We didn't eat broccoli. We didn't eat Brussels sprouts. So it wasn't until insurance helped pay for a nutritionist, someone who could help really customize something that would really fit our lifestyle. That's when we were able to turn our lives around. And that's what I wanted to bring to the masses through this service. Now, again, I shared that story as almost a footnote. And Tim's advice to me was switch it, flip it. Like, talk about that one story first, really share that one story, get people invested in one person's story. And then you can talk about how big the market is, how many millions of people are going through their own version of that story. And when I decided to reverse that, when I decided to flip it, that's when investors started to lean in and become more engaged.
So tell me, the person who reads this book,
Yeah.
Backable by Sunil Gupta, what are they going to benefit? In what way are they going to benefit here? What are the basic ideas in this book, other than what you've already told me? And by the way, Sir Ken Robinson was a very good friend of mine, and I admired him a lot. He passed away recently, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an amazing human being. So that's a very good example of somebody who is totally backable. But tell me what we can find in this book.
Yeah. Well,
The general principles of
yeah. So let's walk through.
backable.
Let's walk through some of the principles. I
Yes,
also just want to say real quick, because you brought it up. I used to think that Backable was just for celebrities and CEOs,
correct.
but it's not. It's something I think we can all use a little of right now in our lives. It's for the factory worker who's been furloughed, wants to re-enter the workforce, the mother of three who's trying to reinvent herself. It's for a church or community organization that wants to build its membership. We always, no matter what type of change we're trying to create, we can't do it alone. We need hiring managers, we need partners, we need investors, we need even friends and family to believe in us. So we talked about this idea of convincing yourself first. The other thing that's inside this book, another concept, the way this book is laid out is that there are 7 qualities, and each quality then brings it down to specific techniques on how to really bring it into your life. So another quality that we talk about in the book is called flip outsiders to insiders. Flip outsiders to insiders. So what do we mean by that? Well, let me take you back to the 1940s for a moment. Betty Crocker introduces instant cake mix to the market. And they believe this is going to be a giant success because all you have to do is you have to pour water into the mix, put it in a pan, put it in the oven, and voila, you get this like tasty treat. So they're really shocked when they find that these instant cake mixes are not selling at all. And they're trying to figure out why. So they end up hiring this psychologist named Ernest Dykta to go into the field and start interviewing homemakers. And what Dykta finds is that they had made the process of making a cake too easy, too simple. What they had done is they had removed the customer from the creative process. So Dykta's recommendation was, why don't you remove one ingredient? Just take one ingredient out of the mix and see what happens. And so they do. They remove the egg and sales take off. Because now when the cake comes out of the oven, you actually feel some ownership over it. You feel like you're part of it. And so researchers have unpacked this now over and over again. My favorite phrase for this is what they call the IKEA effect, which basically says that we value something that we build up to 5 times more than something that we simply buy. And so what does any of this have to do with creativity or innovation? Well, we've kind of been told, Deepak, that creativity is a 2-step formula. You come up with a great idea and you execute on it really well. But there's this hidden step in between. And this hidden step is where we flip outsiders. We take people who are on the outside of our idea and we make them feel like they're part of the idea as well. Because that way, when we show up to execution phase, we show up together. And yeah, I think you can trace every successful movement, political movement, organization, community initiative back to this hidden step, flipping outsiders to insiders.
That's brilliant. So I've already gotten 2 very good ideas here. Convince yourself before you can convince another person.
Yeah.
And flip the outsider and make them an insider. Share some more tips, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the other thing that I found really interesting was I was sitting in the waiting room of a film producer named Brian Grazer.
I know Brian very well.
Yeah. I would assume you do. And so Brian, it was interesting because Brian, as you know, invests in startups and he runs large teams. So I'm sitting in his waiting room and there are people that are ready to pitch him on all sorts of things, right? And you could just tell that the anxiety inside the room was pretty high. People were nervous to go back and see him. So when I went to go back to see him, I said, Brian, you got all these nervous people out there. If I could go out there right now and give them one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be? And he thinks about it for a moment and he says, tell me something that I can't easily find on Google. Share with me an insight that is not easily Googleable. And I found that to be so interesting because the more backers, the more decision makers I started to talk to, that became a pattern. What I realized is that great candidates for jobs, great ideas are usually based on great insights. They're usually based on something that you have found through firsthand experience. And what I call that in the book is I call that an earned secret. So finding an earned secret, something that you were able to do by talking to customers, by test driving the product, by doing something that ordinarily people wouldn't do. So here's an example. A few weeks ago, I was talking to someone who was applying for a job at a social media company. And the thing about it is, she didn't actually use the product. It was a Gen Z sort of focused product, but she really wanted the job. It really sounded like a fascinating job. So she's like, what do I do? And what she ended up doing was very clever. She didn't use the product, but she knew that her daughter did. So she decided to interview every single one of her daughter's friends. What was their experience like? What did they like about the product? What did they wish the product had? And then she did something very clever. She had them send her screenshots of their experience from their phone. So now when she walks into this Zoom interview, because it was during COVID, it was over Zoom, she walks in with this gallery of screenshots that she has collected. And it's unbelievable because not only does she end up getting the job, but the hiring manager right on the spot decides to pull in one of the UX designers right there into the Zoom conversation to say, hey, you've got to check out these insights that she was able to bring into the conversation. So going beyond Google and really putting yourself into the story, collecting unique insights that most people ordinarily wouldn't collect is such an important part of making yourself backable.
Very, very interesting. So already these are very three unique insights into what makes people backable. And I'm sure that's true of the same ideas pertain to organizations and other institutions as well, including nonprofits, I believe, right?
Absolutely. It was interesting with nonprofits as well, Deepak, because I spoke and spent a lot of time with a researcher named Penelope Burke. And what Penelope found was that she ran a fascinating study, and she's been studying nonprofits now for decades. She ran this really interesting study. And what happened was, she noticed that the big problem with nonprofits is really retention, donor retention, right?
Correct.
The vast majority of people who donate to a nonprofit will not donate twice. They'll not donate again. Absolutely. So what that means is if you're running a nonprofit, you're constantly rebuilding your donor base from scratch over and over again. And it's an exhausting thing. So one of the things that she looked at was how do we improve retention? And so one of the experiments that she decided to run was that she split you into two groups with this nonprofit. It was a healthcare focused nonprofit. And if you were part of group A, after you made your first time donation, you got the standard sort of form letter that said, hey, thank you so much for your donation. We really appreciate it. But if you were part of group B, what happened is that you received a phone call from one of the board members, personal phone call saying, thank you. This is how we're going to use your money. This is how we're going to use your generous support. And then critically, the third part was that you were not asked for another donation on that phone call.
Oh, wow.
Not asked for another donation. Then they waited a year and they saw how these two groups performed. Group A, same bad retention rate. It was about a 20% retention rate. Group B, the retention rate was 2.5 times higher than that. And not only was it 2.5 times higher, but on average, each donor made a contribution of 60% more the second time than the first time. Simply from that one phone call where they weren't being asked to donate again, but they were being told a sincere thank you, and they were being told exactly how their money was being used.
Amazing. So, I'm speaking right now to Sunil Gupta, the author of Backable, and he's already shared with me some amazing insights into what makes people, organizations, entrepreneurs, nonprofits backable. I'm not going to ask him to share any more secrets because you have to buy the book. But Sunil, is that what you do now? You help people find solutions to their businesses or to their entrepreneurship. You help people get insights into whether they can take a risk on a person or an organization. Would that be a fair way to summarize what you're doing?
Deepak, I try to spend my time more on the other side of the table with the creators. I spent a good chunk of my career on the venture capital and investing side, and I just kind of realized always I wanted to be on the other side, right? And because I realized that, again, like great ideas aren't always backable, right? They don't always come off as backable. And you could have a brilliant idea, and if you don't explain it well, it may not come off as brilliant, and it may not get the support it needs. Then that means that we're leaving a lot of innovation and a lot of important creativity on the table. A great example of that is penicillin, right? Penicillin was brought to the world by a guy named Dr. Alexander Fleming, right? Yeah. As you know,
right? He was a mentor of my dad, who was a cardiologist. And in fact, I met Alexander Fleming at the age of 5. When my father went to a lecture of his, he took me on his bicycle to the lecture because it was the big deal. He had come to India then after the war.
That's unbelievable. Deepak, right. I've told this story a few times. No one has ever able to say, I've actually met Dr. Alexander.
As a 4-year-old, according to my dad.
So, but then you know that penicillin, it took 10 years for people to really pay attention to what Alexander Fleming had in his hand, right? It was dismissed. People said it wasn't going to work. And the whole thing was that Alexander Fleming was a brilliant scientist, but he wasn't necessarily a brilliant communicator, right? And so again, creativity and persuasion are two different things. And what I love to do is I love to spend time with creative people who may not have had a background in persuasion. They may not be a good salesperson, and that's okay. But we want to take the brilliance and creativity inside their head, and I want to help them bring it into the world so they can have the impact that I know they can have.
That's brilliant. So I have been speaking to Sunil Gupta, the author of Backable. I've already gained a lot of insight, and I'm actually going to ask you a favor, Sunil. May I?
Yeah.
So I have three projects right now where I could use some insight.
Yeah.
Let me share them with you. So one is we have a new app. It's called Chopra, and it's a meditation app, but also a well-being app. And it just got launched a few weeks ago, I think, a few months ago. And we have about 400,000 subscribers in a few weeks, and a lot of them premium. That's one thing. I'd like some insight from you if it's backable, just your insight. The second thing I've done recently, which is actually very innovative, I don't think anyone's doing it right now. I've created a digital AI twin called Digital Deepak. And he's available through Apple. And this guy trains people in 7 areas. He becomes a personal coach since you've already been doing health coaching. So sleep, stress management, and nutrition, emotions and resilience, biological rhythms, connection with nature, and ultimately, spiritual self-realization. 7 aspects. He just launched a few weeks ago. And of course, because this is such a new, innovative technology right now, we have to upgrade it almost every 24 hours because there are glitches, but already people are getting addicted to have a conversation with this guy. And now with the AI Foundation, I'm going a little deeper to create a deep twin rather than a mind twin. So you won't be able to tell the difference between him and me, and you can ask him any question. He gets to know you, and he can become a health coach for you, personalized. And what I'm promising is that the future of well-being is preventable, predictable, participatory, process-oriented, and personalized, and very precise, because this guy can get your biometrics. And tomorrow I'm also launching meditation on Fitbit, so you can in real time know what's going on with your heart rate variability, everything else, and intervene in real time as well. So, and then the third project I've initiated as a nonprofit, which is for suicide prevention. And this is called neveralone.love. I can send you all the information, but it has an AI bot. She's named Peewee after the sister of an actress that I'm working with in this area of suicide prevention. And people talk to Peewee. In 10 seconds, she can detect whether you're at risk for suicide, and she can intervene. And now we are creating a blockchain cryptocurrency to pay for counseling should you need it. And Peewee has already intervened in, let's say, 500 possible suicide events. 1 million conversations with her. People are more comfortable talking to her than to a human being because they don't feel judged. So if I send you links, will you give me any insights into these 3 projects?
I would love to. I would love to. And I will say that, so let me share 2 things. One is that, Deepak, the last time we met was, I think, at an X Prize event. And what ended up happening was, you came in and you guided us. You gave a talk, and then you guided us through a meditation. And what I saw happening inside the room for the rest of the day, you had a massive impact on everybody. And these were a lot of these were scientists and scholars. Personally, I've been meditating now for 8 years. I started meditating on Thanksgiving 2012, and I have not missed a day since. But I didn't know what the reaction inside that room was going to be. I just didn't know. And it was so clear that it was one of the most engaging moments of the whole conference because everybody was so tuned in. But what I was going to share is what happened after that. What happened after that was that I think everybody was in the mindset of how these sort of worlds of, what we're talking about with prevention and awareness and mindfulness, how that fuses together with science, how those two worlds come together. And it struck me at that time, and it strikes me now listening to your ideas, that what you're really working on with these three projects, it's not just new and exciting, but it's inevitable. And I think that's really important because when we think about what makes an idea backable, it's not just that it's new. It's not just that it will change the world. It's that it's actually inevitable. It's going to happen, right? Like a lot of people give Steve Jobs, say what Steve Jobs invented the iPhone and sort of brought that to our lives. The reality is that, and he said this himself, he said he was skating to where the puck was going. The puck was already going into that direction. He just wanted to get there faster and with a nice design, but it was already sort of moving in that direction. I think with everything you're talking about around people creating a trust with AI that's in a safe space and using it for health, for loneliness, for suicide prevention. I think that these seem to me to be inevitable trends. I don't know if you follow on Instagram Lil Michaela.
Yeah.
But Lil Michaela's in my book. So this is the first time she's been in a book. She's AI. But I followed her and I actually interviewed her and her creators because I wanted to understand, like, how is it that this piece of AI now has millions and millions of followers? And it's not just people who are following lightly. They're following and they're engaged. They're engaged in a way that they would be engaged with their best friend. And she's AI. So the point I think is that, with all the projects that you have going on, they're obviously very valuable for society. They're obviously very new and exciting. And I think that they're also they seem very inevitable. This is the way the world is heading.
So you said something very brilliant right now. Follow where the puck is going already. Listen to the collective conversation, the zeitgeist, and then you see what the world right now is in dire need of. So in that spirit, I want to ask you one more thing right now. I think with what happened in Texas recently, it's inevitable that we're going to have to address climate change. We may be already too late, but I believe there are technologies right now to harness energy without using fossil fuels. There are a lot of people who are coming up with creative ideas. In fact, I want to share with you right this moment something that I'd love your insights on in the future, because I think you are definitely ahead of the curve right now in looking at what people need. So, I'm talking about to some entrepreneurs right now, and they're backed by some very interesting people who are looking at reinventing humanity in 5 areas. The first area is information technologies and bringing them all together for creative solutions. And that includes AI and VR and immersive dreamscapes. That's number one. The second is looking at food without killing animals, but also through what is called precision fermentation, and producing trillions of proteins, not just 5 proteins that right now human beings eat: poultry, fish, meat, lamb, and chicken, and eggs. But if we understand the microbiome, planetary microbiome, under the surface of the earth right now, there's more genetic information than on the surface of the entire planet right now. If I dig 1 teaspoon of soil under the Amazon, that has more biodiversity of genetic information than the entire planet on the surface, including all the rainforests. So that's where the gold mine of genes is, which I personally believe is the ultimate solution to climate change is through biological organisms and giving biological organisms thrive, the ability to live in a way that's thriving, because we are a biosphere unto ourselves and the biosphere outside, and this is entangled. So our well-being and the biosphere's well-being is entangled. So that's second that these guys are looking at: precision fermentation and production of proteins through resurrecting the microbiome of the earth. The third thing they're looking at is transportation without fossil fuels and automation. And the fourth thing they're looking at, which is even more interesting, is instead of mining for matter in the earth, we mine right now for coal, for steel, for whatever, they're looking at actually creating matter from the bottom up, from waves and particles and gravity and all of that, fundamental things. So transportation, food, information, and creation of new technologies, ultimately to basically create a new version of humanity that impacts everything from how we live our lives to climate change. Why I'm mentioning this right now to you is I just saw Bill Gates's book, come out, Climate Change. And I think this is a very timely topic. And if we don't address it, we might be heading the way of extinction. I believe that. It's not just climate change, but climate refugees, and then, all kinds of violence that will come as a result. And we're not looking at it. But I think with all that, say, Bill Gates is saying, and all the other people are saying, with the right technologies, unless we change our relationship, spiritual relationship, to what we call the environment, which in fact, coming from Eastern wisdom traditions, it's not the environment, it's our extended body. The rivers and oceans are our circulation, the air is our breath, the trees are our lungs. And the atoms in our body were forged in the crucible of burning stars and galaxies. If we change our attitude, spiritual relationship with what we call the environment or the biosphere, then the technologies can actually come to save us. And as I'm so delighted to talk to you, because you're really in the forefront of creative thinking and what could be backable. There are many things we need to back right now if we want to resurrect our lives and head in the direction of a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. So, for me, this is a great privilege to talk to you, because you're at the cutting edge of actually seeing how business, nonprofits, and a desire to achieve a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world, if we bring that all together, we can actually maybe save humanity. I don't know.
I love what you say, Deepak, about creating a spiritual relationship with the climate and with the environment. I mean, I think that really hits home for me, and I don't think I've heard that phrase that way before. But it really makes me think of a trip that I took a couple of years ago to the Kingdom of Bhutan.
Yes.
And as you know, Bhutan measures itself based on gross national happiness, right? Mm-hmm. I got a chance to spend time with the researchers there and some of the people who are in charge of that program, and it's fascinating to hear them talk about the fact that GDP and economic growth, all very important. It's not unimportant, but it all feeds into something larger, which is the happiness of our people. And we're not always going to get it right, but we know that if we're going to be focusing on the right things, then we'll do more of the right things along the way. And so what the reason I bring that up is because I remember getting off the plane. When you fly into Bhutan, you're kind of flying through the Himalayas, and it's pretty dangerous landing. So you feel pretty lucky to just be on the ground. But I remember when I got off the plane, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like to breathe. Because the air was so pure. Bhutan was one of the only countries, if not the only country, that is not just carbon neutral, but it's carbon negative. They actually provide oxygen to other countries. The water is clean. It just, but the reason that I think that it really relates to what you talk about of a spiritual relationship to the environment is because the reason they do that, the reason that has been a priority is because happiness is a priority. They believe those two are inextricably linked. If we're going to focus on happiness, then of course having clean water and clean air is going to be an important part of that.
I just heard yesterday that Bhutan has hardly had any cases of COVID-19. I read that yesterday.
Yeah.
And that says a lot. While we are hurrying towards vaccines, which is a great idea, and I think I've already taken mine, but I think ultimately these pandemics are related to a stressed genetic ecosystem as well. So, Bhutan, whatever it is doing, is doing something right for sure.
It's an amazing place. Have you spent time there, Deepak?
Only once. My wife has spent more time there, but I plan to. So, Sunil, this has been a very interesting conversation. The book is called Backable. We shared some of the insights, but now you have to read the book, my friends. And you'll see a link to the book on our website and on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. Sunil, ultimately, we reach about 15 million people. So I'm so thrilled to make this reconnection with you, because I'm going to be asking you for advice as we move into the future, if you don't mind.
Of course, your projects are they're so worthwhile, Deepak, and you're putting so much creative, and I think spiritual energy into the world. If I can be helpful in any small way, it would be a thrill.
It's been a great pleasure to speak to Sunil Gupta. The book is Backable. Check it out, and you'll benefit, whether you're an entrepreneur or you want to start your own business, a nonprofit, or you're thinking of investing in somebody else's business. Backable is the book. Sunil Gupta. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.